Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you decided to watch this. It's me, it's the SEEP coming to you semi-live from room 208. I'm sitting in my favorite spot. The sun's shining on my back. I can see the door. I'm in the perfect chair. I'm in a great distance relationship to the lemon air freshener. And I got a little bit of a breeze coming out of the ceiling on me from one side. It's kind of like I'm in my Sheldon Cooper spot, but in reality, I'm in Florida right now. I'm hopefully riding a ride, hanging out with Harry Potter, doing something like that. And hey, you're here. But hey, it's Friday, which means the week's almost over. You've almost survived a 4-day week, and we're getting one step closer to the end. Boy, the June days are going to be here soon before we know it. So hey, here's the plan. I'm going to run you guys through what we're going to do today, get you guys all set to be successful, and get you out the door. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to run you guys through a couple of intro notes for the unit. Nothing too crazy. Make sure you guys got basically a background on what's going on. You should get those into your notebook. And then when you're done, I uploaded a social psychology article that's got some questions that go along with it, and you can spend your time working on that. Again, don't be a pain in the butt for the sub. I would really appreciate that. I don't want to have to come back and deal with any issues. And yeah, there you go. So anyway, once I get back from Florida, you guys are going to be the first thing on my agenda because I'm going to get your speeches in the grade book, and I'm going to get your tests from the other day graded. Hopefully those all went well for you. I thought the speeches were really, really good, and I appreciated the hard work and time you guys put into those. Goal for today is to introduce you to some important terms in social psychology and to get you started on that social psych article work, maybe even get you done. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, general, whatever, you can reach out to me. I can't guarantee I'll get back to you instantly, but I will be checking my phone from time to time, and I can get back to you when I get a chance. So one more crash, and then here we go. All right, so the second chapter that you guys picked is called Social Psychology. It deals with a number of different topics, ranging from culture and ethnicity and how people get along in society to group behavior, like how does being in a group change someone's behavior from when they're alone by themselves, doing their own thing. It's going to deal with race and stereotypes and gender and all kinds of different things. But basically, it's just kind of a look at how do we get along with each other? It's a little bit similar to, I don't know if any of you guys are taking a Jedi class called Sociology or Intro to Sociology, but there's kind of a little bit of a blurred line between psychology and sociology, and this is kind of where that happens. So social psych will be our next unit. It'll take us a few weeks, and then we'll vote again on what comes next. So here we go. All right, some things about cultural diversity. And this chapter is going to deal a lot with people, like I said, dealing with people. And so it's important for us to talk about some differences between people and get some background information and some important terminology out to you guys. So when I was younger, and I took social studies classes in elementary school and middle school, they often, I had to take a lot of American history classes. I feel like that was, probably every year we had some amount of American history. And I remember many of my teachers, Mrs. Burmeister, Ms. Kangas, talking about how America was a melting pot. They use this term all the time, melting pot, melting pot, melting pot. And I remember the old history book we used to use when I taught American history, used the term melting pot. And I remember when I was a kid being really kind of unclear what that meant, and Miss Burmeister talking about how it meant that all these people come from all over the planet, and we come together to make this one cohesive group of people that work together and blend, and you've got all this great unity. When you're a little kid and you hear that, you're kind of like, yeah, that sounds really great. I think of it like stew, melting pots like stew. You got all these pieces that come together, and even though they're separate, it comes together. And if you like stew, I like stew. Obviously, I like food. Duh. It comes together to make this one really great thing where when you take a bite, you almost don't care where the meat is and where the potatoes are and the carrots and whatever you like in stew or whatever whoever cooks stew at your house makes it. But as I've gotten older and as I got into college and started to study psychology and sociology and anthropology, it became really clear to me that the melting pot theory is probably not as true as we probably think. There are aspects of life where things are a melting pot where lines blur and it doesn't matter what color you are, how tall you are, how much money you have, what ethnicity you are, where you're from, anything, and you can work together. I'd like to think this school is like that, but I know it's not like that all the time. In reality, I have always said that the United States is probably more like a mosaic, and a mosaic is a form of art where you have separate pieces. They're usually tile, glass, some sort of usually hard medium, and they're put in place next to other pieces, and together they come together to make like a really unique and interesting form of art. But in reality, they don't mix, they don't touch, they don't truly blend, but they function together in a way that creates something unique and interesting and effective. And so I think that one of the ways that I taught American history is I tried to point out the melting pot aspects, but also the mosaic aspects too. Now, apparently I did something stupid on my slide because that first bullet point under sub-bullet points just say 1900, 9 out of 10 people in the United States were white. So in 1900, 90% of the population of the United States was considered white. If they had checked the magic box on the ACT, they would have checked white. Now, if we jump ahead 90 years, the percentage drops to 7 out of 10. In 20 out of 10, it goes to 67%. And actually, I read this projection on the U.S., whatever it is, Census Bureau website that said by 2060, they expect for the first time ever for white to not be the majority race, ethnicity, or the white ethnic group's racial majority in the country. And that kind of shows how the population of the United States is changing, but it also kind of shows how ethnicity, cultural, racial groups are changing. Now, a lot of that change is due to immigration, and immigration is kind of a hot button, dirty word, racial motivator, political argument. Yeah, political argument. I don't want to talk about politics. But immigration's become a hot button term. But in reality, and I always say this, I say this a lot again in American history, if you aren't 100% native, you don't belong here. You're an immigrant. And so I know my people come from Germany and England and a little bit from like Norway and Sweden, if you couldn't tell by looking at me. A little bit of Irish. That's the red in my beard and the red in my hair. That's right. I'm willing to admit it. I'm not a full-blown ginger, but I'm almost there. But obviously, we pay a lot of attention to this now because the world's a smaller place with transportation and communication the way it is, and we have people coming from all over the place. We literally have people in our school from literally, almost every corner of the globe. And in the psychology world, we study the positives that come from that, the negatives that come from that, and kind of how the interrelationship has affected the way that society works. There are a number of fast-growing groups in the United States that leave an impact on society. The largest growing ethnic group racial group by percentage is actually immigrants coming from Asian countries. And obviously we see a large movement of people from Latino Hispanic countries. We still see a huge number of people coming from Africa and Europe every year. So literally the United States gets a lot of people from other countries, as other countries do. And some of the things that you're starting to see in society is you're starting to see a lot more bilingual people. I don't have any exact statistics on this, but I've looked several times, and the amount of bilingualism, not just in the United States, but in other countries, is at an all-time high. And actually a number of other countries are higher from a bilingual or trilingual lens than we are. Many countries in Europe and Asia teach English and the native language starting at a very, very young age. We now have dual immersion education. Even here in Marshall, we started a program in the LC where kids spend part of their day learning in English and part of their day learning in Spanish. And someday your kids could go to a magnet school someplace if you decide to have small pet baby humans. They could go to a magnet school where they're taught in different languages. I know that I have a friend who teaches in Phoenix, Arizona, and one of the school districts in their one of the schools in their district does some Mandarin Chinese classes at the elementary level for kids. Obviously, also, cultural diversity is a hot button topic in politics. It doesn't seem like a day goes by now that there isn't some, reference to immigration or, students from other countries and visas and things like that. And I don't want to get into the political end of things, but just, it's obviously something that's out there that's talked about quite a bit. Now, last slide for today. And I know it looks pretty busy. There's a lot going on here. But there's some important terms I want to kind of get out of the way, want to define now, because they kind of sit in the background of everything that we're going to talk about throughout this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the definitions not according to Webster's Dictionary or the Oxford Dictionary. I'm going to give you the definitions according to the American Psychological Association or the APA. The APA tries to make sure that they stay scientific in their definitions of things, and that they try to remove themselves from some of what they consider to be the clutter of everyday life to stay kind of politically neutral, argumentatively neutral, and things like that. So there are three kind of terms that we use interchangeably a lot that we shouldn't, and those terms are culture, race, and ethnic group. Culture, I remember, again, elementary social studies classes having to define the word culture like a million times over the years. And, you come down to it and, like we've learned, like a hypothesis is an educated guess and mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. There's just some definitions we've kind of like shortened but memorized in a way that make them effective to us. And I remember culture, I remember shortening it to the way a group of people live their life. And I think that that's effective. But according to more, I guess, wordy definitions, it's a set of beliefs, attitudes, and values held in common by a large number of people and passed down from like generation to generation or within a family. And so if you think about it, think about your own family or your extended family, however you guys do things. Think about holidays. We just had Easter, obviously Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, things like that. Are there certain like ones that are maybe a little bit more important and maybe more people get together or celebrate differently? And then again, I just went kind of with traditional, basic American holidays. Your family might do something different, Ramadan, things like that. Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, various. Obviously, there's a great big world out there, guys. But are you? Let's use Thanksgiving. Are you turkey people? I know some people do lasagna. I have a group of people that do pizza. Somebody told me one time that was when their grandma made the best tamales ever and brought me one, and it was fantastic. But those beliefs and the values and what's important and shared. Now, the hard part is your family probably has a family culture. What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? What are the rules? What's the expectation? When do we do this? When do we do that? Do we give everybody gifts on Christmas, or do we just pick one? There's a lot of things that play into this. But when you think about a country, I'm gonna ask you a question here, and I want you to reflect on it for a second, so you can pause and think about it if you want to. Does the United States have its own culture? This is going to be one of those things we're going to grapple with a little bit in this chapter. Is there an American culture? What defines American culture? Is it apple pie and baseball and the 4th of July? And I don't know. Obviously, when I look around, I'm not sure I can nail down any one set of things, because we are this mosaic, and we do have this collection of people from other places. Culture obviously plays a huge role in that. And then you have race. Now, race is biologically a set of hereditary physical characteristics. These are things that you're generally born with. Obviously, when we talk about race, the general focus is on skin color. And skin color is an obvious marker of race. It's visually probably the easiest one to pick out, but it's not the only racial feature. Eye shape, hair texture, actually in some cases like muscle mass. You have there's like some people are more likely to get certain illnesses. I remember in the last mental illness chapter, there was some talk about some different things like that. And so there's a number of different racial markers that we use that people are born with or have developed over the years for various reasons. I'd talk about this more if it wasn't doing this on video or you guys have questions and I can answer them. But race is different than culture because, for instance, you can be Afro-German, or, obviously in the United States, there are a number of people who consider themselves to be American, but they come from different racial backgrounds. Then you have ethnic groups. Those ethnic group is even a different way to look at things. Those are people that come from the same country or area that have similar race and culture. And so ethnicity is even a more focused group. Like, for instance, we talk about Spanish as a language, but Spanish language is different depending on what area you live in. The words for certain things are different. My ethnicities, again, I said at the beginning, I've got some Norwegian, I've got some German, I've got some Irish, I've got some British. And each one of those different ethnic groups has foods and traditions, like the German part, the brat and bratwurst, and oh God, what's the terrible smelling? I'm losing my mind right now. Sauerkraut, ew, gross. It's just absolutely the worst. Hanging a pickle, like a glass pickle in your tree, your Christmas tree. There's a lot of traditions that go along with that. Okay, and so in looking at that, those terms all have kind of a line that blurs because we all have a culture, we all have an ethnicity, we all have a race, but they're different ideas. Then you got the ones that are hot button controversial topics right now, and I don't want to approach them through that lens. Again, I want to talk about the American Psychological Association and how they define them. Okay, so two different terms, sex and gender. And again, I don't want to argue about this. This isn't what I'm here for. God, I'm glad I'm doing this on video where no one's gonna whatever. Sex is a person's biological characteristics at birth, typically classified as male or female based on anatomy, chromosomes, hormones. Now, obviously, you can have people that are born with where this gets a little trickier because they're born with possibly the anatomy of both, or you can actually have external anatomy and internal anatomy that don't, from a sex perspective, they don't match up. Okay. And sometimes here, and I might show this when I get back, I show a video about this idea that even here, I'm going to ruin Finding Nemo for you if I haven't already done this. Clownfish can actually spontaneously change gender or sex. So you take Finding Nemo and you had Marlin and all the little baby clownfish and you had the mom, and then the barracuda comes along and eats the mom, right? Well, theoretically, the way clownfish work, I think Marlin would become a female then, and so that kind of changes. It's not Marlin necessarily looking for his son; it's Marlin looking for the only remaining male. So kind of changes. Yeah, there you go. All right, then you've got gender. Gender is, for lack of better terms, in the psych world, it's state of mind. They're the socially constructed roles, masculine and feminine, and non-binary and things like that. Behaviors that supposedly accompany those things, expressions, and by expressions I mean things that were called, things that are generally accepted behaviors, and then the identity of the individual. And in the psychology world, gender is something that is not biological or decided at birth. Gender is a state of mind. And so back in the old days when Facebook and MySpace and things like that first started, they often asked you to choose your gender, and you had two options, male or female. At one point, I think Facebook had 54 different options for gender, and then they just left it as an open space where you could type whatever you wanted. Now that I've gone through those slides with you guys, sorry, I know I'm pretty long-winded in parts in there. What I want you guys to do is stop the video and take the time to go in and start working on that social psychology article. Check out the due date. Again, treat the sub with respect. And have a great weekend. I will see you guys next week. Have a great day. Go Cardinals.